Okay, perfect. So the reason, like I explained to you, that I wanted to record these interviews, I think I'm doing 3 or 4 with you students. I know that I have the interviews of other people who have successful businesses, other therapists, but I have always been a person who I don't like to learn, or I don't get motivated by somebody who's 10 years ahead of me, or what. Like I want to learn from somebody, or I'm more motivated, I should say, by somebody who's closer to where I am. So that's when I thought, oh, it'd be really cool to have just from the students, hey, what you guys are going through. But then a year from now, and of course the questions will be different, a year from now, but like you said, it'll give me a light a fire under my butt to make sure that I'm not still so that's good too.
Yeah.
So if that's good, if it's good with you, let's just jump into these questions. So we have the list, and then we'll just see where the conversation takes us. Okay, I do want to silence my phone.
Note get a better camera so I look as good as you on cameras.
You look better than I look on camera. Look at my hair. We're human. Okay, so first, I know who you are, but for everybody else, will you please introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what brought you to the world of Myo.
Okay. So my name is Lacey Biviano. I am a dental hygienist, and this year will be my 20th year in dental hygiene. And I know it's crazy. I don't even know where the time has gone.
You don't look a day over 20.
That's what my patients tell me sometimes. And I'm like, thanks. And I'm like, so anyway, what brought me to myofunctional therapy is really just feeling burnt out from hygiene. It takes a huge toll on our bodies, and it's mentally exhausting and physically exhausting. And I think that was where I started. I went to college for 4 years and ended up with an associate's degree in dental hygiene, because I couldn't really figure out what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And I still tell people all the time that I still don't know what I want to do with my life. You know what I mean? Because I hadn't really figured it out. I loved being home in the pandemic when we were home. I loved being able to be with my kids. I mean, it drove me crazy because I had to be a teacher. But that was I had heard about myofunctional therapy then, before the pandemic, and had started researching programs, and didn't really find something quite yet. And then the world turned around. So we were kind of like, I don't really know. Let's do what I'm comfortable with. These are discussions with my husband. And then I decided to circle back around with myofunctional therapy, kind of through my boss. I had talked with her about myofunctional therapy before the pandemic started, and she wasn't my boss at the time. And then I didn't go back to my previous position and started working for this particular boss. And she was the one who mentioned it to me again. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to look at that again. And that was kind of how I ended up finding Carmen's program and the Ditch Hygiene Academy program, which wasn't the program I originally started with.
Yep. So you're in that anomaly. You're the handful of people that are like,
I'm the double dipper.
Yeah. Which I think, like I told you the other day in coaching, I think is good. You're gonna see the whole enchilada. New students will have no idea what we talk about when we say an advanced phase 1 or something like that. So you really get the luxury of seeing really how I changed over time. Whereas these people are just going to get me when I'm running a multi 6-figure business, not when I was running a $25,000 business, which was or 35,000. I think that was my first year, and that, my first 6 months. So that's awesome. I'm always so curious how people find out about it. Mostly now, I think a lot of them are starting to find out about it at their dental hygiene conferences and that kind of stuff. So there's always a lot of information there, or a teaser, like people get introduced to it. I spoke I did a keynote last year for a large, for the Rocky Mountain Dental Hygiene Study Club. So I think there was like 100, maybe about 100 hygienists in that room. Not a single one of them in that conference had heard about myo. And I was just like,
It's very interesting because you are more on the West Coast and I'm on the East Coast, and we are so far behind. The East Coast is so far behind the West Coast when it comes to airway, when it comes to frenectomies, when it comes to holistic medicine, when it comes to all of those things. So I think that was really why I hadn't heard much about myo. And I mean, you ask any provider around here and they have no idea what you're talking about.
and that's so weird because I think the East Coast is so, of course, I think East Coast and I go straight to New York. And I just think like they're so progressive and they're so ahead of the times. And it's like New York and LA, you know, so interesting. I think there's pockets also. So,
Yes, I agree.
okay. So, how did you know that it was for you? So you told us how about you first heard about it, but how did you know, like, right here, this is for me? Because you make it, you know, when students invest in the gold level or when you invested in the MyoMax, that's a significant investment. Like I can invest in courses all day long at $3,000, $2,000. But once you get into that price range, you're like, ooh, this is a really significant investment. So something at some point told you this, I see a future in this. So what was that for you?
Yes. So I think when I started doing a little bit more research on myo, I reached out to a few people who I had found their information, and I was just kind of like, so tell me about this. And it gave me like that feeling, that gut feeling, and that like the heart palpitations and just the make you a little sweaty. And I was just kind of like, I don't know why, but it makes me feel at home. It makes me feel like I've been given a purpose. And I've been like, not to sound all woo-woo on us, but like kind of like a reawakening and a new excitement, not necessarily for dental hygiene, but a new excitement as to ways that I could help people in something that was mine and for me, and not a vision from somebody else. And that was one of the main reasons why I went with the Ditch Hygiene Academy, is because I saw that there was a lot of support in the business side of things. And I think that's what happens a lot of times in dentistry is you have a dentist who's really good at dentistry and not so good at the business. And it's really hard to like marry the two. And I come from a long line of like family entrepreneurs. And so for me, I have always had a vision of having my own business. And I wanted that for myself. And I felt like the other programs I was seeing weren't offering that, or weren't offering the business side and the actual like step-by-step guide. And to be honest, I don't even know if I knew when I signed up for your program how involved it was going to be with the.
Is that good or bad? Like you,
I mean, it's good because I feel like I've had a lot of hand holding and a lot of, not in a bad way, but like kind of sometimes it's dragging and sometimes it's a little kick in the butt. And sometimes it's like when you say some things to me in my coaching calls and I'm like, ooh, I knew she was going to get me on that one.
I knew she was going to ask me like why I wasn't doing this. Yeah. But that's the thing is I'm there supporting you. I'm not leading you.
Yeah.
I'm not following you. I'm walking alongside you and mentoring you. You know, every person who leads is different. And I'm more of like I'll ask you the hard things though, because that's what I always say. That's what you paid me to do, is to ask you the hard stuff.
And I remember we had, I don't know if you remember this, but I remember we had a phone call.
I do remember that. Yeah.
Getting off the phone with you before I signed up for the program, and I didn't sign up right away.
Yeah. No, you were a while. You
Yes.
had to bake in it.
And it wasn't anything with your program. It was like just stuff for me that I had to kind of bake in and kind of get my mind right and be like, make sure I was ready for this, because I knew it was going to be a big undertaking.
Yeah.
But I remember just getting off the phone being like, that's my person. I need Carmen in my life.
I do hear that. And that's the biggest thing. One thing that I teach you guys is your ideal human, as far as your clients. Like I met somebody last week, knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that she was going to work with me. And, and you guys know I'm the most expensive one to work with. But I just knew we just had that connection. And so I call that your easy peasy dreamy customer. And I have some of that with students where they're like, no, I explored other programs and it was just that connection. And that's what I want, because I'm not for everybody. Everybody's not for me, so that's awesome. I want to go back to your comment. You said the woo-woo comment, because I had this weird, I'm not super religious, but more like, maybe not even spiritual, but I always just say, I don't need to be religious because I live by the golden rule. And I think that that's a pretty good way to live. But I always do in my car, have these conversations with God or whoever wants to listen, I'm talking, And so I had one day, a couple years ago, where I just felt really like, okay, I've already conquered Myo. Like I never thought I could get to this point. I mean, all I wanted was 100,000, let alone did I ever think I'd go, pushing 300,000. And I just was like, I don't know. I got to do something different. Maybe I'll do more business coaching or whatever. And so it was so funny because I was having my chat with the universe about like, it reminds me of like, are you there, God? It's me, Margaret, because I was like, okay, like I'm talking to you and I'm asking for guidance. Like, should I transition more into business coaching and less Myo and, because I've been there, done that type of thing, or do I stay with what I know and what I'm really good at? But like, you're not giving me anything. So I don't even know if you're here or listening. So as I was talking, I was headed to the mountain biking trail with my dog. And long story short, at one point, I thought I hit a rock and I thought I was going over the side of the cliff.
Oh my gosh.
And all of a sudden, so I tucked my head and I was going. And I had this rule that I don't bike in areas that I don't want to wreck. So I'll walk my bike because it's really scary terrain in some of it. So I had some scares before. So the rule always was, I don't ride my bike in an area where I wouldn't want to wreck. So it's not like I was going to kill myself going over this edge, but it was going to hurt. And it was just, I wasn't going fast enough, which is, a metaphor for life and business also, because you have to be going fast enough to get over the bump, let alone like I did. And so I just went, and I tucked my head and I thought, all right, Lord, here I go. And it was like something grabbed my shirt and slammed me on the opposite side of the hill on my butt so hard, like it knocked the wind out of me. And my dog came up like, what are you doing? And I had the weirdest feeling. And I was like, I got you. I just got your message. You're here. You're here. And that was exactly what I said is, I'm supposed to keep doing what I'm doing. And my legs were like jello. I got back on my bike and I'm like, mother ever, and I just thought there was my divine message of, just in the weirdest way. So I'm woo-woo with you. I'm just not on a super religious thing, but man, that day stands out to me as clear as pie of like, no, this is where your calling is. This is where you rock. So that gave me goosebumps when you told me that. Okay. So did you tell us where you live and a little bit about the business that you intend to build?
So I mentioned that I'm on the East Coast, but I'm in Massachusetts.
Okay.
I live kind of near Plymouth, Massachusetts, where the rock is that everybody talks about, where the pilgrims came. Like 15 minutes north of there. The rock is nothing to look at, just so you know, if you ever want to visit. And I am currently working towards setting up my business to be a virtual model.
Okay, awesome. What's your why? I think you alluded to this, but I want you to put it out there.
So my why is definitely just feeling burnt out and wanting change. But also my family is very much my why. I 100% believe my son has sleep apnea, and I've been saying it for years and have gotten very stuck with doctors and unable to really like push past that the how do I want to say it, the denial of doctors, and that, and just not feeling people not feeling heard. And so that's one of my very big whys, is trying to sort my son out. And also one of the other things that really got me very much into learning about myofunctional therapy is learning about sleep apnea and kind of going through that diagnosis with my husband. And that really started getting me thinking more and more like holistic mindset, and working towards what can I do to figure out how to help him. And that was really kind of what brought me in into myo. And just, I don't think I ever really realized how much like sleep apnea and myofunctional therapy can come together and be married. And to be honest with you, I think when I started the myofunctional therapy program, I don't think I ever really, not that I didn't know what it was. I mean, I knew what it was, but I learned so much more than what I thought it was, which is another part of my why, I guess.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's funny because my my growth manager, Erin, emailed me the other day and said, what's the biggest question, or the biggest, I guess she said the biggest pain point that people come to me with? And I was like, bar none, it's sleep. It is sleep quality, it's sleep concerns, whether it's sleep apnea or something. It's just, it's this huge hodgepodge of people who just don't feel good. And I think sleep apnea, considering that 80 to 90% of it is undiagnosed, I think that there's a massive, massive portion of that. Okay, so next, so what kind of decisions have you made so far? So, in the Ditch Hygiene Academy that I really talk about making decisions, moving forward, taking imperfect action. You have to get some data to come back. And for myself, for a long time, I was like, oh, I'm good at making decisions. I make my decisions so fast that I never come back to evaluate them to see if it actually was helpful or not. But I encourage you guys to make a decision, to go ugly. Just go get in there and have some data to make or to evaluate. So what kind of decisions have you made?
Ooh, that's kind of tricky. So decisions as in like what I've done to move my business forward.
Yeah, like from when you started, what kind of decisions have you made that have brought you to this point? I mean, clearly you've decided on a virtual business model, but what other decisions have you made?
So I decided to hire somebody to do a website for me because I knew that was just a pain point that it was just not something I was willing to, I don't want to say sacrifice the time. I just felt that my time was going to be better used, putting my energy towards something else. So I hired somebody to work on my website, which is currently being done. I have worked on getting all of my discovery paperwork together, and customized to my business. I've already filed with the state for my business. I'm working on getting my insurance right now, some liability insurance, and working through just getting my business set up so I can get rolling.
So you can get rolling. What about the logo? So I got a sneak peek at the logo. Have you made a decision on that?
Yep. So I went with that last logo that we talked about, the fourth one. So I used that to customize my paperwork. And we started, so it's the same person who's doing my website that made my logo. So that was kind of the first step, which was great because she's like, okay, now that we have the feel, let's get the homepage all ready to go. So that's what they're working on. But it was great because once she got that done, I really felt like I could start taking baby steps and like making a list of things that I need to do and crossing things off, and those just little steps at a time.
Yep, they all add up and they're so important. So those are big decisions. It also starts to feel more real when
Yes.
when you have a launched website, you're going to be like, wow, I am the real deal now,
Mhm.
and it was funny, since I did mine by myself, I accidentally launched it a couple times, and I was like, oh, how do I take that back? Because I'm not ready for that, but once it was up and going, I thought, wow, this is really legit. I
Yeah.
do have a place to send people. So
Well, it's funny you should say that, because that's what happened with me for social media. I like set up a page for why Myo matters, and I don't think I shared it with anybody, but somehow it might be a suggestion to other people in my network who have started following me. So I was like, well, I might as well post something. So, oops.
sometimes it's just like, I remember when I was like first figuring out how to do like an Instagram live and that kind of stuff. And I was like, well, I guess the good thing is I don't have, 60,000 followers to make a fool of myself. So, and there's always the delete. That's the thing, is I just want to know, is there an eject button?
Yeah.
Like, can I go back in and remove that?
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. So I know the answer to this, or at least part of it. What kind of brave conversations are you having? So just to preface that for anybody who's watching this, I'm also a big fan of not only, making decisions and taking imperfect, ugly action, but also having brave conversations. And those brave conversations start very early on with just looking, especially when you're still in the operatory, looking in the mouth, having those conversations, having a conversation with your boss. So tell me a little bit about brave conversations that have been going on in your world.
So I've had to have some brave conversations with my boss about just setting some time aside during the course to be able to work on the course, because she didn't know I had decided to do this. And I kind of kept it a secret, because not because it was a secret. It was just I needed to be solidified and be arrive there when I was ready to arrive there with other people. So having the brave conversation of saying, okay, I've done this, and now I need to be able to set aside some time during my workday, some days, to be live on the course. So having that brave conversation, that was a while ago. And then also when I see patients and I'm saying, okay, so this person is still sucking their thumb. Why are they still sucking their thumb? And seeing and explaining the things that I'm seeing that are related to myo to my boss has been interesting. And getting some surprised reactions that they didn't necessarily know or understand, which is really kind of cool when you can teach somebody something that they didn't know.
Yes, and also that there's room in the room for you and her, because her ego is not so big. Because some people, and I can be guilty of that sometimes, just my personality, like I won't be the person who raises my hand and says, I don't understand that. I'm getting better as I get older, and I think that happens, but I'm not very good at raising my hand saying, I don't understand that. Could you unpack that for me so I can understand it? But amongst doctors and specialists, there can be not there between them and their ego, there's not room in the room to have a conversation with all of us, and they'll never ask that. So it also puts a little bit of wind in your sails, don't you say, when you can be like, yeah, I can tell you, like, look at me, I'm awesome. But when you can educate her.
Mhm.
Now, you are setting up your business outside of the office, correct?
Yes.
So it's your business. Yeah. And that's always what I encourage everybody to do. And some people do want to keep it, on the DL for a little bit. Like,
Mhm.
hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm doing my business, because sometimes it can then be awkward if the boss is like, hey, I had this idea and now you're doing it. Or oftentimes the boss wants to pay. I always tell everybody, no, you make your own investment
Mhm.
so that it's your your deal. So that's good. I did hear you say starting to have conversations in the operatory, because there was a day not too long ago during coaching where you weren't having any conversations in the operatory, correct?
Yeah. And it's funny because some of the conversations are even just with my coworkers. They're hearing me say something and they may ask about it later. So we work in, so I work in a general office and a pediatric office that shares space. It's one practice. And then I work in a separate practice as well. And so there's a hygiene bay. So there's a lot of chairs. And so sometimes the other coworkers are hearing me say something to a patient and asking them certain questions or looking at something, and they kind of will say to me, what did you do that for? Or can you tell me more about that? Or, they're asking different questions now. And that was why I think I probably didn't want to announce to everybody about me doing this course, is because I was afraid of the questions I was going to get. And now I'm not afraid of them.
Yeah. Yeah, and you'll learn from those questions. It's okay to say that's a great question. I don't 100% know the answer.
Mhm.
And depending, of course, where people watching this are in their journey, like in the lesson where we do, and we haven't done it yet, but it's coming up, just the review. No, conversations with confidence, conversations that convert. It's just like all of these random questions that people might ask you, and you have to be able to, like, if you're at a cocktail party and somebody asks you this kind of question, you're going to be able to just answer it. So you start somewhere, and you start by having those conversations, which is why I used to always have conversations with kids, teenagers, you name it. I was practicing, and like, you're there, your mouth is open, you listen.
Mm-hmm.
And they always went, huh, not always, but sometimes that message traveled somewhere else. And I was like, dang, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And the other thing that's very interesting too is we are also coming out of, the COVID pandemic. And I honestly believe in my gut that wearing masks, as much as we had to wear masks, has really, really caused a lot of mouth breathing. A lot of mouth breathing. So I'm seeing a ton of that. So being able to have those conversations with patients and just being, letting them know that it's not normal and it's not okay. And it's really a habit, and we have to break that habit and kind of go from there. And people, when I hear other hygienists say, oh, it's normal to mouth breathe, it's not normal. So I'm very much saying it's not normal, and
it's not healthy.
not
It's
healthy.
terrible. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And just, I was having a conversation with a mom yesterday about this, because parents sometimes will say, oh, Johnny has allergies, or he has this, and it seems like he's just constantly has a little bit of a bug. Like, yeah, but are you checking to make sure that once the bug is gone away, that he's gone back to breathing through his nose? That's the thing, is if they don't ever realize it, they don't know. But that's part of our message, and our educating is what's normal, what's not normal. No, sleep apnea is not normal. You just got a diagnosis of sleep apnea. Why is it untreated? Well, we're going to watch it. No. Watch it all the way to the grave? What? Come on. No. So that's good that you're speaking up, and that also is developing that brave bone of like, hey, this is my profession. And I am kind of protective of it, and actually, no, that's not true. Let's talk about that. So how do you handle, this is totally a question that is not on here, but how, knowing what you know and what you have learned, how do you handle night guard sales in your office, or conversations? Has that come up at all?
It has, more in my personal life than at work. So I've had to have some unique conversations with one of the dentists I work with, and explain that, because I used to be a huge proponent of, or a huge advocate for night guards. I really believed in them. And then it was learning about, sleep apnea and how it's really causing more damage than good. And I've stopped wearing my night guard that I wore for probably 13 years, I want to say. And having to explain to them like why it's not good, and get them to understand is a little difficult.
Yeah. And
because
you can't, all your job is, I always say you can lead a horse to water, but you can't get them to float on their back. Like that's up to them. So putting the information out there. I have many family members, people like my dad, okay, has a crown on every tooth, gets a new night guard, however often, knocks off crowns, whatever. Is he going to listen to me? No, he sucks the paint off the wall when he snores. He is like a walking case for a heart attack. He's not necessarily in a mindset to sit down and listen to me talk about that he has a problem.
yeah,
My own honorary Marine, tongue tie. Does he have any interest in doing anything about it? Nope. But normally he's really good at rolling over. When I say, hey, you're snoring, roll over. So yeah, but the information's there. And so for some people, I have decided like, I am the knowledge keeper. And if you want it, you can come ask me. The same kind of, totally different vein, but nutrition with my nutrition certification. Not everybody wants to learn it from me. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. Well, I have some knowledge up here when you're ready, or if you want it. So
I found that the conversation was slightly easier to have because oftentimes I'm just not the person who would ever contradict what the doctor says in front of a patient. I might say to the doctor something afterwards, like, oh, just, this is something I've learned, but I just don't feel comfortable doing that.
Yeah. And that's respectful because it's pays your bills as well.
Yeah, exactly. But when I went to my own dental appointment, they asked me about a night guard and everything. And yeah. So that's more of where I've been more comfortable saying things. I just keep business and personal separate. I learned the hard way not to mix the two years ago. So I don't see any of my bosses for dental work. And so when I went to my own dental appointment, the office I had gone to had been sold. So it was a new provider in there. And when they asked me, they didn't know I was a hygienist, but they asked me about a night guard. And then, after my cleaning, I explained that I was a hygienist and studying myofunctional therapy and why I wasn't really wearing my night guard anymore. I had waited till I got out of the chair, and the doctor, it was like my appointment was over and I was just a person at that point. And so I explained to them why it wasn't good to wear a night guard. And they were like, it's a husband and wife team. And they were both like, oh my gosh, like they were ready for the information. They wanted to hear more. And they're like waiting for me to set up shop so they can talk more.
And that's awesome. So that is also from your program. I talked about it, the SEO, seize every opportunity. We talk more about it in the ditch hygiene, but that's, again, using every opportunity to have a conversation. You can't just force it down people's throat, but in a natural conversation. Those are brave conversations. But again, you had that opportunity, and look at, it's probably going to turn into some sort of avenue of some sort for you.
Yeah.
And then
awesome. My husband is the one who tells everybody. He's like, I've told you about my son and taking him to the ENT, and my husband's like, yeah, so she's a myofunctional therapist and she knows. And I'm like, shh.
That is good though, because you just never know when you're going to talk to somebody who can change your life. And I shared this story about Matt, who owns the sleep study company. And it was just like, at this point, because my business is so much larger now, but there for a while, it literally changed the course of my business. Also, my meeting and meeting Dr. Bieneman and him taking me under his wing, I was like, had I not ever just reached out to him and said, hey, here's what I'm doing. It was funny because when I was starting into myofunctional therapy, it was really, really new. And so me reaching out to him, it didn't feel like I was like a realtor and there was, a bazillion of me. And it's so funny now because just even in the Denver area, I've had several students, and they're always like, is it going to step on your toes if I go meet Dr. Bieneman? I said, no, he's the best. I want you referring to him also. go learn from him. I learned so much from him. And I don't know that he has the time to take that he used to take with me. I mean, we'd be on the phone just talking for a long time about a case or whatever. But it's funny because now it's growing, which is good because we need it. I mean, everywhere you look, there's myofunctional impairment.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Starting
all
with all of your students.
That's crazy. I know, because a lot of my students, not so much in the past, but now I'm starting to get a lot that are like, well, I have a concern. However, I am also more involved with these students, which is why we redid the Ditch Hygiene Academy, is because in the past, unless they did like the MyoMax program, they didn't have a lot of access to me, and it was all recorded. So it like now when I'm coaching on Fridays, like that's unheard of. So I want to be more involved at mentorship. Again, I call it love, and I'm not going to love you and leave you. Like, I don't want to just teach you. I want you, if you can't do something with the information, Lacey, then you're not going to be successful. And you're therefore not going to send another hygienist my way to take my training.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I always just say my success is your success. So that's why I really want to have I want my fingers in the cookie jar. Okay. What kind of boundaries are you setting?
So boundaries have always been something that's difficult for me, because I'm a people pleaser by nature, and well, in some aspects. Other aspects, I'm like, I don't really care what you think. But when somebody asks you to work for you or cover their hours, or like you get a billion emails from school where they want you to come in and volunteer, and I have to really, really remind myself that some weeks I'm going to be able to do that. And there's some times where I'm not going to be able to do that, and reminding myself of those boundaries. And then reminding my kids, they're not super young anymore. They're 10 and 13. So you kind of become a taxi driver and an ATM, and remind my kids. I just had this conversation with them the other day. I said, you guys, it's almost summertime, and we have to remember that I'm trying to start a business. And in order for me to start a business, I have to have time to be able to work. So just reminding them of those things. And my husband is super supportive, but sometimes he forgets that, like I have a career as well. And it doesn't always look like I'm doing something, but oftentimes I am. I don't know. He asked me some question the other day, and he gets the brunt of me sometimes. I was a little grumpy towards him, and it wasn't anything he said. It was just, I was like focused on something, and I'm very much like, I have to focus. I can't not focus when I'm doing, like, I'm not a good multitasker. And I kind of snapped at him, and I was like, ooh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to snap at you. And he's like, that's okay. I know you're doing your work. So just stick with doing your work, so.
And then talk to me afterwards.
Yeah.
It's funny because, and you'll probably feel some of this as you transition a little bit more out of hygiene, or like in coaching the other day when Stephanie mentioned that she has cut back a day, and I was like, what are you going to do with that day? Because with all due respect, you will diddle it away if you're not thinking about your business hours. And there's times where I specifically will tell Scott, I will be in my office until 6. Mm-hmm. Yes, I can hear you out there pouring a gin and tonic. Yes, I can hear you out there. But I'm going to be in my office till 6.
Yeah.
And those are boundaries, but I haven't always been great also, because there is also the luxury of, I own this damn company. Oh, you want to play cards and have a cocktail at 2? Sure. So there definitely is some benefit of that. Yeah. But sometimes it is other people boundaries. My grandkids are here, all of that stuff. And my daughter will ask questions sometimes. And I'm like, I do work for myself, but I also have clients that schedule, sometimes months in advance. And so that's something new, because I used to just have people say, okay, see me in 3 weeks, see me in 2 weeks, or whatever. And now, because I'm more strict on my package duration. So you're 6 months, you're phase 1. I want you to see me boom, 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 boom. And I want them to all schedule out. And I do that because then I can kind of see, like next week, I'm just taking a random trip for business down south. And so I was able to look, okay, I've got I could just move a couple people and I've got the full week off versus, just having people all around. So it's nice, but boundaries are really important. And I used to also find myself cleaning the house and doing all of this other stuff. And then come Saturday, I have work to do. And I've had to put the kibosh on that. Like, nope, I'm doing stuff. I mean, I do go do my stuff, my exercise, my take the dogs to the park, those type of things. But I tell Scott, like, if you want me off on the weekends, then I'm not cleaning house and preparing for camping during work hours. So just the same boundaries I tell you guys, set your work hours and do work in those work hours. The same applies to me in most cases. Again, I'm the owner and I trump everything. Okay, what has been a challenge so far?
Probably boundaries.
You're making me spill my coffee. So boundaries. Okay. So you've got some room for growth there. Anything else?
Having difficult conversations.
What about, how do you feel about like learning the material? So again, going back to, you have this anomaly situation because you were in the MyoMax program and then I put you into this other one. So there's going to be times where I'm like, nope, do what I'm teaching you now because that's not relevant in my business. But what about like the material? Because I have had some students who really struggle to put the information together. And it's not necessarily, I don't feel like it's how I teach it. They're just not getting it. And sometimes it's really common sense. And I'm like, come on. But no challenges with that, or what has been a challenge with trying to put the material together?
Because like you say, it's kind of like a soup. And you see the bits and pieces within the soup, but sometimes it's really hard to see the whole bowl. So I think for me, like going through the MyoMax program and being able to kind of preview all the information and go through all of that. And I wasn't so much worried about like mastering it because I knew I had the Ditch Hygiene Academy to like be my refresher part of it. So that's kind of how I've used the material. Like I learned the material there, but now the Ditch Hygiene is like, oh, I remember thinking about that and I had this question. So for me, it's more of like almost a review and feeling more confident in, but I feel like the Ditch Hygiene is maybe a little bit more organized in that way.
Yeah, I really set it up, because after I did my nutrition certification, you had to learn all of the nutrition before they even talked about the business portion of it. And then I took a separate business course for the first 10 weeks of this year to help with that. And I thought, because the other programs were really meant to do some of everything, which we're still doing in the Ditch Hygiene because some people are wanting to do both. And then for others, they're like, nope, I just want to get the practical applications, that kind of stuff. So I do think it's more organized. And I set it up after the NTA model, just of, hey, you can't start your business when you don't know how to do an exam or, those type of things. And then because I put a lot of information available to you guys, like, hey, go look at these business interviews, go look at, if I've got stuff, go look at it. So some people are working ahead, other people want to work right there. So I wanted to set it up to help both.
Yeah. And the only thing, and I don't think it's a downside, but like, I remember like, because I was so focused on getting through the information with MyoMax, I think I ignored some of the Ditch Hygiene stuff, like some of the practical applications where like what's it called? The student, practice person.
Yeah. Just like doing a partnering with somebody to practice. Yeah.
No, I did that, but like I ended up like the case study that we're doing, like our own patient.
Oh yeah.
Somehow I missed that part. I don't know why, because I was going back and forth between the programs. So I kind of wish I hadn't done that, but it's okay. Like I'll be fine, you know?
You'll be fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And remember, other people, other than the three of you guys in the MyoMax, everybody else, it's just ditch hygiene only. And if they don't enroll in the gold program, the gold program, they have access to everything. The other levels only get one lesson a week.
Mm,
So they'll really be, slowed down.
mhm,
And that's purposeful, because some people just want to dip their toe in and make a small investment, and other people like you and me are like, cannonball.
mhm,
It would have actually killed me once I got into Myo, and just looking back on my journey now, how fat, like I was intense, and I was working full time. But when I get into something and I just saw, like, everybody thought I was crazy. You're going to walk away from an $80,000 a year job. What, are you nuts? And I was
mhm,
just gung ho, and that's all I wanted to take in. It would have killed me to get one lesson a week, because I'm like
mhm,
once I'm into something, I'm really an all or nothing. And it was hard for me, because I think I knew I was going to do it in October, and my class didn't start till January. So when my class started in January, I already knew what my business name was going to be, all of this stuff. And I had been researching, and so I knew a lot going into that first course, and I was like, come on, come on, come on. And so, and my cohorts were so different than me. They were really slow. I mean, I was graduating, having my first client, and I remember one of the ladies asking something about what a domain was. And I was like, oh Lord, so I at least I dig in and I figure it out. So, okay. What has been exhilarating so far? That's a big word, exhilarating.
exhilarating. I think just really starting to see everything come together, and like, I'm gonna have a website like soon. I mean, not that soon, but like soon. And like, oh my God, like that's exhilarating to me. And being like, I mean, I'm on my calculator saying, okay, so if I take 4 clients by blah, 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 I can cut back such and such, you
Mhm.
know. And so that's what's really driving me to
Yeah.
want to keep moving forward.
What about putting that logo on your paperwork? Like, I
Yeah.
love the creation. If I could make what I make to live in Canva and just create, eventually we'll be launching a business for content for you guys. So, it'll cost you however much per month, and we put out the content. You get to take it and make it your own, but we put it together for you.
Mhm.
I can't wait. I've been wanting to do that for 3 years, and every year it's like, not yet, not yet. We're closer.
Yeah.
So I love the creation. So there's just something about seeing, like that logo go on your paperwork, and you're like,
Hmm. Yeah.
this is mine. This is real.
Yeah.
So I love that. Also, when I got my first order of brochures, I was like, yes.
I know. I know. I'm like, so one of my things that we've talked about in coaching is writing a letter to providers. And it's like, I haven't sat down to type it, but like, it's all I think about in my head of what I want to say and how do I want to talk about it. And because I'm just so excited to like figure this out for people. Like that's what I really love, is like I've always been this way. Like I can't tell you, I mean, obviously I can't diagnose things, like, but I can't tell you how many times I told people, I think you have Lyme disease. They'd come in and like tell me all sorts of symptoms. And I'm like, I think you should talk to your doctor about this. I think you have Lyme disease. And don't you know, 6 months later, they'd come back and say to me, you were right. I was diagnosed with Lyme disease, like, and just being able to help people in that way is just so exciting for me, and connecting the dots. And that's how I try to bring this up with patients is like, I'm like, okay, so you're telling me you're not sleeping very well and you're this, and let's think about these dots and how they connect together, and how we can get you feeling better.
Optimize. Yeah. And that's the whole thing. When people are like, why do you say you work in wellness? Why don't you just say that you're a myofunctional therapy? Like, because I work in wellness. Sometimes I feel like a counselor. I did an exam the other day when the lady was all but in tears. I mean, and she was ready to part with her $5,000 like 5 minutes ago, like, how soon can we start? Her voice kept cracking, and again, I said, I knew she was my dream customer, because she was just like, oh my gosh. But I have so many of those people. And this is what I love outside of hygiene. And when I was doing my work with the book Pivot of my strengths, and looking for that pivot, like, what skills do I have? What do I love about hygiene? What do I want to build upon? It was that I loved helping people. But how exciting is a 6mm pocket to a 4mm pocket? I mean, not that exciting, right? And so that's all there was. Or somebody doesn't have a ton of buildup this time. Woohoo! But that's what I love with my clients. When I did sleep promotion with somebody yesterday, and we were just talking about her, because she's not a tongue tie case. She was literally a custom wellness case where she just felt terrible. She wanted to go through this. And just yesterday, when she said, I feel so much better, and we're like 10 months in. It's just that domino, or when I have somebody say, I started and I felt like poop, and I felt like, now I feel like $1 million. I have shared that story maybe with this particular lady who asked me if I saw plus size clients. Have I ever told you this story?
Yeah.
And it still just gives me goosebumps, because she was just, she just thought plus size was like the worst thing in her life. And don't talk to me about it. I don't want to deal with it. I just want to deal with this tongue tie, because that's the one thing I can control in my life. And in the end, it controlled everything. Her doing myo helped everything. And when she was like, when we were done and she said, I feel like $1 million, she was working out more often than I was, all of this stuff. And I was like, yes. So that's what I love. And when I sit down with my clients, sure, I have those days where it's like a client, which is why I'm very passionate that you guys need to have your right client, because so you're excited to hear their story, because if you dread seeing them on the calendar, they're not your ideal customer. And everybody will go through that just like I did. How are you staying organized?
So I have my big binder. Because I'm like of that generation where like some computers, some paper and pencil, I'm still going to always feel way more comfortable with paper and pencil. And I like to write notes and those kinds of things. So I have my binder and that was when I was going through the MyoMax program. I was like doing a lot of notes and printing and blah, blah, blah. So that's kind of that, but really working to try to do, I use the tech videos all the time. Like I go back and rewatch them to make sure I'm getting the maximum out of how to stay organized, and making sure like, okay, I have this folder on my computer for discovery paperwork, and I have, like I'll have client folders. And so the tech part of it is a little hard for me to stay organized, because I feel like my brain doesn't think that way sometimes. Like my brain doesn't think like a Google Drive.
That's hard. That's such a good way. And that's funny, because my brain now does think like a Google Drive.
Right. I know I'll get there with practice. But because I'm a hygienist and I'm not in the business world of, you've never had to be organized that way. Right. So it's a learning curve, but there's some days where I feel super organized. And then there's some days where I'm like, okay, I just need to take a few minutes and clean up my desktop because I took a billion screenshots of something, or just making sure that everything's in one spot, or,
labeled.
Yep.
That's a biggie. It's funny because images and stuff, I never used to label my screenshots, and I'm still bad these days, but I at least put them in folders so they're in a smaller area. That makes it a whole lot easier, because I'll search for something now, and like I looked for sleep hygiene stuff the other day, and it was like the graphic came up like 12 times. I don't need it in 12 spots. So clearly I had some organization issues. We have a lesson in the program on system processes, and I think that is helpful too, of just knowing, okay, this is how I onboard my clients, and I'm staying organized that way. And this is my payment system, and that kind of stuff. And there's spreadsheets that go. I'm a spreadsheet. I have the world's largest spreadsheet, and we learn that in the money dashboard.
Mhm.
When we go through that, but that helps me stay organized so that I have everything at my fingertips. I know what my year to date is. I can look at my accounts receivable, all of that stuff, which is really helpful.
Mhm.
Okay. So what has been your favorite thing so far with the Ditch Hygiene Academy?
I really love the coaching and the live sessions with case studies. Because I feel like I can sit there and just in my own mind start picking up on things and like have the reassurance that yep, that's where looking at pictures of things. So I love that aspect. I love the coaching, always the coaching. Like whenever I get off my coaching call with you, I go back and reschedule the next one.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Like I do coaching every Monday with my business coach. And sometimes I just learned from other people, or I also I love hearing what the coaches say, because it's not always my business coach. Sometimes she has guest business coaches. And so it's somebody different, but sometimes I'm like, oh, that's totally what I would have said. Or I already knew that answer. I knew that this is what they were going to say. So that's good. And that's really why with this component, this new program, I wanted to make sure that regardless of now that we've got different level, different classes coming in and all of that stuff, there's going to be questions from a variety of places. There's always something to either grow from, glean, just get some little piece of information, or reconfirm like how much of a badass you are. Like, oh yeah, I already knew that. I
Mhm.
could answer that, or I answered it right along with Carmen. So I love that.
Mhm.
There was something
But I
else.
also feel like the coaching, the individual coaching keeps me on track too. And like just little chunks of, okay, do this, do this, do this. And it's just keeping me enough moving forward to be making progress every week or every month.
Do you think, since you got to see both when we started coaching and I had an agenda versus when I changed it to meeting you where you are,
Mhm.
what do you feel about that transition? Which method do you prefer?
Um, I prefer the meeting me where I'm at method. Um, because sometimes I show up to coaching and I have no questions and it's just a conversation as to, okay, I'm stuck here, or I don't know what to do, or what is your advice for this, or um those kinds of things. So I think that's helpful. And then sometimes I have a whole list of things that I'm like, okay, I need to talk to you about this, this, and this, and where do I go from here?
Yeah,
Or how would you do this? Or how do you think I should work with this?
yeah.
Um,
And that's why I changed it, because I had a great agenda, but I would have clients that, they weren't ready to talk about a website critique in month 5 because they were still way back there, or, the different parts of it. So, yeah, I love the new thing. It's definitely easier on me too, but more importantly, is I want to meet you guys where you are, because you might be like, oh, Carmen, I am not even thinking about my website. Yes, I know it's important, but I'm still trying to figure out this piece, or I'm stuck here. So that's good to know. Okay, so what would you say to someone who's considering jumping in?
Buckle up and just do it.
Buckle up, cannonball, put on a nice swimsuit and jump in.
Get your best swimsuit, but not too nice because it's going to get messy.
That's funny. Yeah, this is not a wading pool.
Nope. There's going to be some waves and you're going to doubt yourself um and it's not always going to be pretty, but sometimes you got to go ugly early and you just keep showing up, because I think that that's probably the best advice I can say, is to just keep showing up, because we all have this inner dialogue that makes ourselves
Mhm.
doubt what we're doing. And if you don't show up, then that dialogue's going to win. But if you keep showing up, you're going to just make the small changes every week to put you in the right direction. And eventually those small steps will be the mile or 2 miles, and your business is just going to keep growing and you're going to keep learning, and it's going to be confusing at times because you're not going to be able to put all the puzzle pieces together, but it will eventually show its face as to a whole puzzle.
I think that, and that's what I tell people. And I in both programs, I have said, like, there is no beautiful way to deliver a red bow on this. Because until you go through it and are like, now it's making sense. But just going through, and I used to just write down questions. Okay, what about this? What about this? And then I would go back and scribble it out, like, oh, I know the answer to this. Oh, I know the answer to this. But I do get do a lot of coaching calls with potential students, and they'll say, well, how am I going to do this? And how am I going to do this? And how are you going to guarantee this? Like, they have a lot of fear-based questions. And I'm like, friend, you got to do you got to deal with that, because there's no guarantees here. What I have doesn't mean that that's what you want. You might be a lot like what I used to be and say, hey, I just don't want to touch a 204 SD ever again in my life. And I don't want to, if I ever have to say 4, 4, 3, 4 again, I'm going to be like smashing my toe with a sledgehammer. So everybody has a different want or a different why or a different end goal, but a lot of fear-based questions, I'm like, you got to figure that out for yourself. You have to just jump in. So that's good, because I'm a cannonball into the pool kind of person, and who even cares if there's water in it, right?
Sometimes the splash is huge and sometimes it's not that big.
Sometimes it's belly flop, and sometimes I get a wedgie, but it's gonna all be fine. So, well, I look forward to, I'm gonna have such a fun time when we come up for questions for the second part of the interview, because you're going to be speaking as a business owner. You're going to be speaking not as a greenhorn, like this exciting stuff. So I think it's going to be so fun to just see how the journey is. And then you get to see, like, oh yeah, that was back before. So yeah, just for the record. So at this point, you haven't had clients, you haven't had any paying clients, right?
Nope.
So everything is just going to be from the ground up. So awesome. Super thankful for you for doing this and taking the time.
Yeah, thankful for you too.
All right. Well, I think I'm going to hit stop here real quick. Okay. Come here. I got to get it right. Come here. Oh,